Drone operators from North Korea are helping the Russians conduct military operations in the Sumy region. This information was reported, and the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine showed a video from an intercepted drone that was launched by North Korean military personnel. According to the agency, they have also recorded communications between North Korean UAV operators and Russian soldiers, in which they exchange coordinates and arrange for artillery and rocket fire adjustments. What is this system, and how useful can North Korean military personnel be to the Russians here? Mr. Vadym, what's going on here? Is this about exchanging experience, or is it just about using manpower that can be trained to carry out these operations? Or are they simply top-level, highly qualified specialists, and that's why the Russians brought them in? In
the first place, it's about exchanging experience. North Korean soldiers are mastering the technologies that, among others, the Russians are providing them, and for this, they need to acquire and develop practical skills. To say that North Korea has some significant background in terms of experience or certain skills is not accurate. In fact, we see that they are only just learning and are mastering this equipment precisely in such conditions.
And if we talk about the Sumy region and why North Korean military personnel are there, is it a coincidence, or is there some specific reason for it? What is it connected to?
First of all, this is connected to the fact that in this direction we see that active combat operations have somewhat decreased, and accordingly, most likely, both Russians and North Koreans are present there. The officers saw an opportunity, the best one in their opinion, to gain such skills without active resistance. We also see that the security service of Ukraine is actively countering them in this direction as well. And the targeting of drone crews and operators is ongoing work that is being carried out on every section of the front.
And in that case, do you see any change in tactics that the Russians might use, for example, by involving North Korean military personnel on other sections of the front?
As of today, there is no evidence of their involvement on other sections of the front. For now, it has not been observed. As for the possibility of their use, such a possibility always remains. And here everything depends on the conditions under which it would happen. The agreement on the use of the North Korean contingent is finalized in these negotiations between Russia and, in fact, North Korea.
Today we spoke on air with a serviceman who represents and is currently stationed in the Pokrovsk direction, and he mentioned that the Russians now have a tactic where, instead of splitting up into small groups, they've come up with the idea of sitting in certain boxes. And in this way, they move together in some kind of mobile transport, either to save their equipment or as one of the specific tactics they are currently using. Have you heard anything about this? What kind of technologies are these?
We see that the Russians are suffering losses, including in automotive equipment, especially when it comes to vulnerability to explosions and mobility. Previously, there was widespread use of motorcycles and other light motor vehicles. Now we see that with worsening conditions and the arrival of autumn, motorcycles can't always go everywhere the enemy would like, and they also don't have enough seating capacity. So accordingly, the enemy is adapting various wheeled vehicles for their needs, including these kinds as well. These are, it would seem, very unusual vehicles.
By the way, how does the weather work in Ukraine's favor? In other words, what else are the Russians unable or find it difficult to handle that we could use to our advantage?
First of all, the weather conditions during this period affect mobility, but we see that the enemy, even despite such weather conditions, still tries to deploy large mechanized units. However, this is not a consistent trend either. In particular, we can observe this on certain selected directions where the enemy uses such tactics, but overall, maneuvering is indeed what suffers during this period. In such weather, and we can see that on some sections of the front, the level and intensity of combat operations may even decrease.
We understand that right now what is burning these video clips where everything is on fire in Crimea and in fact on the territory of the Russian Federation in particular, as Kirilo Budanov says, is mostly thanks to us and our weaponry and to how we are able to carry out these strikes. If or when we receive ATACMS, how might the picture of these hits change?
The situation could change in terms of scale, since we see that the tactical and technical characteristics of these cruise missiles in their latest modifications, Block 4 and Block 5, have an effective strike range of 2,500 kilometers. So this will expand the planning horizon and, first and foremost, the range of targets that can be struck using these assets in the hands of the security service of Ukraine. This is one of the key directions that can truly enhance our forces' capabilities to strike Russian strategic targets even deeper in their rear.
The Russians are currently very concerned about the fact that Ukraine might receive Tomahawks. We are not yet discussing the quantity, but even the mere possibility is already frightening Putin, and he is even resorting to certain negotiations, conversations, and is trying to quickly talk to Trump. Is there any way for Russia to somehow protect itself during the time while we are accumulating these weapons, to hide its facilities, to defend them? I don't know, those nets they're building around their sites definitely won't save them from Tomahawks, but still, can Russia prepare for this?
As of now, we can see that the Russians really do have very strong an air defense system, but there is also information that their stockpiles of certain missiles are running out. Accordingly, Russian industry is not always able to supply the necessary number of interceptor missiles. We also see that the successful actions of the security and defense forces in this area are primarily aimed at reducing the enemy's potential to repel air attacks. This includes the destruction of radar stations and striking other elements of anti-aircraft missile systems across a whole range of directions, from Crimea to deep inside Russian territory. And this also adds to the enemy's attempts to cover their territory as tightly as possible with air defense systems. But we see that this doesn't always work out. If we talk about the closure, camouflage, or relocation of enterprises, then the Russians feel quite relaxed in this regard, and apart from using nets, they are not taking any active measures at the moment.
The enemy has become more active on the front in the Oleksandrivsky direction. The Institute for the Study of War reports this in its latest assessment. They write that the Russians have advanced somewhat in two settlements there, Poltavka and Novovasilivske. Also, citing data from the UK's Minister of Defence, the Institute for the Study of War notes that the enemy has captured the village of Verbove in the Dnipropetrovsk region. This is also part of the Oleksandrivsky sector. Analysts from the Deep State portal had already reported changes on the map in this direction the day before, noting that the enemy had advanced in 3 villages at once. Meanwhile, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reports about 15 Russian attacks there. The most assaults were in the Pokrovsk sector, where the enemy tried to break through our defenses 37 times. But the total number of combat engagements across the entire front for the day has decreased slightly to 128. Usually there are up to 200. The General Staff reports that the Russians are suffering serious losses in the Dobropilya direction. Here, the occupiers tried to advance with a column of combat vehicles, which our defenders destroyed before it even reached the front line. Soldiers of the Ukrainian Naval Forces, together with an SBU unit, conducted a successful special operation in the Mykolaiv region. Our defenders destroyed an entire ammunition depot belonging to the Russian occupiers in the area of the Kinburn Spit. The soldiers released spectacular footage on social media, adding that every accurate strike is a step towards victory.